It's okay. Nós estamos online. Boa tarde a todos. Good afternoon, everyone. Today we have an international speaker, Professor Daniel Hugo Fruman. So I'm going to speak a little in Portuguese and a little in English. Sejam muito bem-vindos ao nosso canal do PRH 45 da ANP aqui da UFSC. Hoje é a nossa última palestra de 2021. Quero agradecer especialmente. Muito obrigada mais uma vez pela presença, né? Muito obrigada a todos vocês pela presença que nos acompanharam até aqui. O PRH é o Programa de Formação de Recursos Humanos da ANP para o setor de petróleo, gás natural e biocombustíveis. Eu sou a Tatiana Bendo e eu sou pesquisadora visitante do PRH 45 aqui na UFSC. E o professor Júlio Passos, ele é o nosso coordenador. Today we have the pleasure and the privilege of having here with us Professor Daniel Hugo Fruman. Professor Fruman, we thank you so much for your kindness and for taking the time to be here with us today. Now, I'm going to talk briefly about the Professor Fruman's career. We thank you so much for your kindness and for taking the time to be here with us today. Dr. Daniel Hugo Fruman is engineer by University of Buenos Aires, Argentina, and doctor engineer in 1965 in France, defending a thesis on supercavitating hydrofoils. In 1962 to 1982, he joined the National Center for Scientific Research, CNRS. From 1971 to 1975, worked in the United States as engineer at Hydronautics, Inc. From 1982 to 1998, he was professor and head of the group Interface Phenomena at the National School of Advanced Techniques in France. And from 1989 to 1998, scientific manager of the Hydrodynamic Laboratory of the Naval School in Brest. He has participated in numerous studies relating to the aerospace industry as external flows around submerged missiles, internal flows in the bearings of the Ariane 5 rocket motor operating with cryogenic liquids. In the automotive industry, he has worked with cavitation in the power steering valves and in the injection ports of diesel engines. Currently, he is an expert at the Versailles Court of Appeal and since 1998 an independent consulting engineer. As such, he performs scientific and technical work in fields associated with energetics and fluid mechanics. He is a fellow of the American Society of Mechanical Engineers and was the founder and the president of the French section of ASME, fellow of the Society of Rheology, French Society of Mechanics, and the Hydrotechnical Society of France. Another information about Professor Fruman's career is his hobby as a collector. Professor Fruman and his wife Josiane gathered and organized a very beautiful and very rare collection of embroidered liturgical ornaments and worship paintings. The collection began in 1976 with rare and masterpieces, the oldest dating back to the 15th century. Since 2009, the collection was donated to the French state and exposed in the Cathedral of Notre Dame du Puy-en-Velay, where are displayed from time to time in the cathedral treasury. They also have a book published and a website about this subject. Now, before we start the lecture, I would would like to remind you that are following us to ask your questions in the chat, that they will be displayed at the end of the presentation. Once again, thank you very much, Professor Fruman. We are ready to hear you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Tatiana. Thank you very much, my dear friend Giulio. Then, before I start, I would like to have to say a few words. The responsibility of my presentation is all the responsibility of my former doctoral student and now professor, Julio Cesar Passos. He sent me a mail asking me, what you don't talk about this pandemic and what is going to happen after the pandemic. Then the whole responsibility is not mine, it's him, but I assume at least a lot of this one. Then let me say a few words also about the way I proceed. I try to use data that is available through internet and that allow me to have quite a good idea about the validity of the data. Then for any information that you want to have after the lecture, you can certainly take few words and get the same information I got to prepare this presentation. Then that's right, we have had a pandemic. It's called COVID-19. Now we have already 2 years after it started. In France was in March 2020, and you will see during the lecture that it started practically at the same time everywhere. And after 2 years, it's still difficult to make a full idea of the consequences. Then this is I would say, an intermediate report or analysis of what has been going on. Then what Giulio asked me to think about was how the COVID pandemic would affect the evolution of the problem, and there are many, many problems the humanity as a whole was facing prior to this, what I call bump on the road. And I think people already will be saying, wow, he is talking about the bump in the road when we are talking about COVID, so serious subject. But let me give you the definition of a bump on the road. A bump on the road is usually something not very serious that delays a process or prevents it from developing. Then the only thing I am going to do first is to try to see if really is so serious, this COVID-19. So serious, I would say, not on the individual level, but mostly on the level of the planet, because on our civilization, that's true. Then how can we try to evaluate a bump on the road for COVID-19? Well, the most important, I would say, is that COVID-19 caused a lot of suffering. People that were sick suffer a lot, people die. Those that were affected by the COVID in many cases are still suffering. They have the consequence of what we call the long COVID effects. Then, but how can we put a price tag or a number on the suffering? It's absolutely impossible. Then we have to look to something else. And unfortunately, death count is probably a good parameter because it's a number. Then yesterday night I had a dinner with two friends, and during that dinner I asked them, "Do you know how many people die in the world from COVID?" One say, "Oh, about 2.5 million." The other went much up, 10 millions. I say that because people don't know exactly how many people die, either in their own country or in the world. Now, if we believe the data, and this is what I call hard facts, the deaths in 2020 were about 2 million. And from the 1st of September to the 20th of September of this year, when I started preparing the presentation and gathering the data, there were practically 3 million people died, which means that right now we are at about 5,300,000 or something like that. But the total count at the end, at the time of I prepared the presentation, was 4.7 million. This is a lot. Everybody will say that's incredible. It's a large number. It's true. In absolute value, it's a lot. But relative to the population and the annual death toll is not as much. In this chart, you have the year, the population. The population in 2021 is an extrapolation of the data, but probably these extrapolations are generally very good. The total deaths are the deaths that we were known at in the month of November. And then you have the deaths that are ascribed, given to COVID. Okay, these are the official numbers that are published in many of the sites that you can consult. Then what is important to see is that the COVID deaths is a very, very small percentage of the total population, and this is already quite good. And in any event, as compared with the total deaths, is less than 10%. And this is true for 220 even today. Then let's try to see a little bit, see if all these numbers really impact a lot in the demography. I think that's a very important question, how COVID is changing the evolution of the population in the world, in the planet, I would say. Then in this chart, you have the list of the years from 210 and 2020, excuse me. I took only 10 years because I think that's largely enough to have an idea of what is going on. You have the population. You can see that the population is steadily increasing from 2010 to
Daniel,
2020. Yes.
Est-ce que tu as déjà changé tes transparents, tes slides? Because here I can see only the first one with the title. For you also, Tatiana?
No, I did
Yeah.
change that. Then
Nous n'avons pas la séquence de tes transparents.
Et dans les autres non plus?
Non, je n'ai que le premier.
Okay. Then let me change something. I don't know. We did that with.
Sorry for this.
Okay. Now and now, do you
Not
see
yet.
the...
Non, il est congelé là, comme si la.
Well, we try with we tried this with Tatiana and did work.
Professor, do you see only your window of PowerPoint, or do you see the StreamYard window?
No, I can see. If I do that, the only thing I see is the window of
Your presentation
slides.
of PowerPoint of
Yes.
slide?
Yes.
And try change for the next slide, just for
I am doing that.
no. We can try to close the presentation and open again. Okay.
Okay.
Yes, this
I
can
will
arrive
remove.
here. Restart.
Restart. Yes.
Foi a mesma coisa que aconteceu no outro dia lá com Lunesta da Driste, né?
Then what should I do?
You share your presentation again?
Okay. But I go from the beginning?
Yes.
Yes.
Stop. Close your presentation first, and share and after share screen.
Okay.
Partagei, yes.
I am going to do that now. Let me take a little bit of time. No. Palestra. Okay, let me open Palestra. Okay. Now I go to here.
Share screen.
Yes.
And choose the option window.
Wait. Wait. Okay, window.
And you will okay.
Now let me
Okay.
go on.
Now, I think
Now you need you
I
will
go to the full screen.
yes.
full screen, and you only see your PowerPoint window.
That's all.
Yes.
Yes.
Now we can see the other slides. Yes.
And you can see also the animation.
The miniature, yes.
I am seeing the PowerPoint program with the editable mode, not in full screen.
Not full screen?
Not yet.
No, not in full screen, not in presentation mode.
Well, I am in the presentation mode.
And you only see your PowerPoint?
That's all I see, yes.
Yes. Oh, I don't know.
But let me see what you're seeing there. You don't see my full screen.
Yeah.
Then what's going on? Why not? Why you don't see okay. I don't understand that. We did that already. Then okay, let me try something else. And now?
No, it's not
okay.
working. Animation is not working.
Okay, then I don't know exactly what's going on. Let me try again. Wait. Okay, wait a second. Okay, let's partager. Okay. 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 I am saying what to do. Ouais, partager. D'accord. Fenêtre. Oh, yeah. Okay. I think. Okay. Good. Then let me see. Oh. Okay.
Okay.
And now we have the full screen or not?
You put in full screen and
Yes.
just open your computer. You minimize the StreamYard window and just you will just see your window of PowerPoint presentation.
Then what I do with the other one? I don't understand that.
Here I'm seeing the PowerPoint program with not in presentation
In full
mode.
screen. I don't
No,
know.
not full screen.
Okay. I don't know what to do then. Okay. Let me see what to do. I don't know. Okay. Now we have in the screen.
Yes,
Okay.
working.
Then let's work with that. Okay.
Okay.
Then let me move faster into this one that we already discussed. Okay. And start by this one. Okay. Okay, good. Then going back, I said that death count is a good parameter because at least it's a number. And I said that already, 220, we have 2 million. In the 9 first months of 2021, we had nearly 3 million. We have a count of 47 in the month of September of 2021. 21, I would say, that's all. And we were at 5.3 million 2 days ago, something like that. What is important is that then 4.7 is a lot in absolute values, as I said before, but relative to the population, that the annual death toll is not as much. And then now we can see the chart. And as I said before, 220, we are about 7.8 million. That's a mistake. This is beyond. Good, I made a mistake. And for 21, we are at about 80 million more. 80 million more. No, that's million. That's right. It's okay. Excuse me. Then the COVID deaths. We said that we were going to investigate a little bit the ratio between the total death over the population, the total population. I want to see how the normal, quote unquote, death in a year impact the total population. Okay. Then I move to the next chart. And finally, we get to the one where I stopped before. Then this is the chart between 2010 and 2020. This is the population. The population is increasing continuously. The total death, you can see that they are increasing a little bit, but roughly they are between 54 and about 59 million a year. This is the ratio between the total deaths and the population, and we will see how it changes. And there is nothing easier than a graph to see that kind of things. Okay, that's what happened. You see both parameters are moving together, total death and total population. And what you can see here, this ratio is decreasing from 2010, and it's decreasing quite steadily, going down, but something happened between 14 and 15, and it started to be reduced, the difference between two consecutive years, and you have a change in 217, 18, up to 19, and you see that here we are changing the slope, we are changing the curvature. And here is the point where COVID starts. Then if we look at that data, you can see that between 2017 and 2019, we have an increase on this ratio. And we have also an increase in the year 2020. Both two values are very close, very close. But what this indicates is that we can always ascribe to COVID what is happening in 2020, but we don't have any really hard insurance that this is due to COVID, because we had in the two previous years a change on this slope. Now, this is quite important because we had that change in the years 2020 to 2019, and there was any dramatical event that was produced at that time. Then let's now go and see that in spite of these changes, the population has increased in 220 by more than 21 million, and this represents roughly the population of Germany. That gives you an idea of how the population is increasing. And if you look now, and we try to see what is the effect of COVID-19 on the increase of the population, we have this graph where you can see here the population in billion, the years, and you can see that this is a straight line, and COVID is just here. From the point of view of the total growth of the population, COVID hasn't had any significant effect. Then that's for the population. Let's try to see what is the effect of COVID on the richness. And the gross world product is a combined gross national product of all the countries in the world. Okay, it's the GDP, the sum of the GDP of all the countries. And this is a real good measure of world richness. And when I went to see the data, I found this figure of the world richness that showed that it goes up till 2014, and then there is a drop I was extremely surprised of this drop because at that time nobody talked about a drop on the regions of the world of the world, the planet, of our human civilization. Then it started increasing again, and here, yes, we are at the COVID point, and then we have a drop here. Now, what I discovered is that this effect is what was called global trade slowdown, which is a phenomenon that was mainly related with the variation of the what is called the commodities, the trade of the commodities. But what is important to see is that this drop in richness, production of richness, of 4.24 trillion is much larger than what produced COVID-19 during the year 2020. Again, this, I would say, seems to be a natural effect, as natural that can be this one. Then the collateral effects associated to COVID-19 indeed did create a reduction of the richness, but was not as large as the one for only an economical effect, which is the global trade slowdown. Everybody that wants to know about this global trade slowdown, they have the reference in here. Then what happened about another big problem of our civilization is the CO2 world emission that are cause of the greenhouse effect and all the consequences of the greenhouse effect. Then what happened with that? Again, I went to look for the data, and you see the first here increase from 2010 to the end of 2013. There is a small variation here that is smaller but analogous to the one that we saw for the global trade slowdown. And then it started increasing again. I want to remember you that there is an increase in a period where people are supposed to be reducing the production of CO2. But in 2019, there was a reduction, probably because there were a lot of economies. And in 2020, there was a reduction that was much larger. And this one can be ascribed to COVID, are the consequences of COVID. Then let's take a look to this. What is interesting is that at this level, we are at the level of production of CO2 in 8 years before. We can see that here this can be ascribed to the global trade slowdown, but I don't have any true fact to prove that thing. And finally, since COVID started here, this drop, yes, can be eventually be caused by the pandemic. Now, is this change going to change whatever is going to happen in the future? Because we are looking at least at the short or long-term future. Well, nothing much, because what counts in the production of CO2 is not what we produce every year, is what we are sending to the atmosphere every year. And therefore, what counts is the amount that we are increasing every year the presence of CO2 in the atmosphere. And like I did for the population, what counts is the cumulative emissions. And you see the cumulative emission from 2010 to 2020 really is a straight line, and the variations are extremely small, and we cannot see any kind of significant effect due to the COVID in any event. Then COVID did not significantly decrease the accumulation of CO2 in the atmosphere, and this is the cause of the greenhouse effect. Let's make a summary quickly now, because I am a little bit late. Then the world population with COVID or without COVID is increasing. The augmentation was 81.3 million. This is close to the population of Germany. Every year we are creating a new country with the population of Germany. That's the main fact. The second main fact is that wealth. Well, there was a drop of 3.03 trillion. This was smaller than the global trade slowdown, but in any event, there was a less than 10% reduction of the production of richness in 2020, which is a very low value. The climate change, well, nothing happened. We are still sending a lot of CO2. The CO2 is accumulating in the atmosphere, and the green effect is still there. It's not going to change because of COVID. What about 2021? Then these are prospects, but since we are close to the end of the year, these prospects are quite reasonable. And most of the time, the values that are computed following certain models are quite appropriate. Then about the population, the world population in 2021 is predicted to increase by about 80 million in spite of COVID. You can go to the many sites in internet and you will see that number. It's okay. It's a country like Germany. The global economy is set to expand 5.6%, which is much larger than the drop that we saw before on the global world product. And on top of that, the GWP is projected around 93.86 trillion in nominal terms, according to the IMF. And this is 9.3 trillion more than 220, then larger than the drop that we consider just before. And about the CO2 carbon emissions from every production will rise to 36.4. This is an increase of 4.9% in 2021 compared with last year, which means that we are coming back to what was before the pandemic. And again, the data can be seen by everybody. And you see, sorry. Up. I put a roulotte at the end as image, because the stock market is a kind of game, and I had the curiosity to see what happened in the stock market, several stock market in the world. Here we have the Dow Jones. This is the United States, the Nasdaq. You see that there was a crisis, no question. When people knew about COVID, there was fear, and people sold, and then the prices went down. This was also true for the London Stock Exchange. There was an increase after, as you can see, everywhere, also in Japan. Then after the crisis, prices of shares increased. Something happened in England, but this, I think, is more due to the Brexit than to the COVID. Now, since I am talking to people in Brazil, I decide to go to see what happened in Brazil. And you had exactly the same thing. This is March of 2020. This is the COVID craze. This is the Bovespa, the Brazilian stock market index. And you have the COVID crisis, and you can see that here it increases with some bumps, and here is a big bump. And I was very curious to see this bump. I say, oh God, this can be probably due that there is a sharp increase in death count in Brazil. And I want to see the variation of the death in Brazil. And this drop here has nothing to do with the drop or with increase of the death toll in Brazil, because there was, during this period, a sharp reduction of the death toll. At this time of the year, roughly, the death toll was about 4,000 deaths a day in Brazil. And here we are at about, if I remember correctly, 150 or 200. Then this is probably politically or economically induced causes, has nothing to do with COVID. Okay, and what about other areas in Brazil? Well, Brazil population in 2021 is expected to increase by 1.4 to 1.4 million, which is roughly what happened every year in Brazil. The wealth. Well, again, as for the world, the GDP, which is the equivalent, the one I use, GW, is for the world. This is domestic for Brazil, is going to increase for 4% in 2020, increased, and is expected to increase by 5.23% in 2021. Again, this is coming from, I think, a good information side, and everybody can control the data anyway. And about the climate change, that's interesting. In 2020, the greenhouse gas emissions in Brazil increased by 9.5%, while it was reduced by 7% worldwide. That's the drop we saw at the beginning when I was talking about data for the world. I didn't find any data for 2021, but I can predict that emissions are going to be as high as in 2020 and probably higher anyway. Then we can expect do another conference, another presentation next year to see if that values increase or not. Donc, so what are we going to do? First, we have to see that doesn't look too bad if we consider the data we have. The damage from COVID-19 seems to be contained for many reasons, but the most important is that they are contained. Population is still increasing, wealth is still going up, CO2 is still going up in the atmosphere. Nothing has changed compared with years before. Then I say, in that case, I have to go back to the past and see what happened in previous years and maybe previous centuries and previous millennium. But I didn't have the data. Then I found a lecture that showed that this is not the first time that humankind has suffered pandemics with major death toll than we had today with COVID. And this data came from a presentation made by Steve Pinker, which is an investigator that has published extremely very good books, and he's on social sciences, which I am not. And that's what he produced in September 2020 at McGill University. Then let's take a look. In the middle of the first millennium of our era, there were 20 million deaths with a plague called Justinian. This is 40 to 50% of Europe. The Black Death in the 14th century took between 75 and 200 million lives, and this conducted to 10 to 60% of Europe. The colonization of America, I haven't thought about that, is considered have produced, if I can say produced, 55 million, and this was 90% of the indigenous people in the whole territory of America. The third plague pandemic, I didn't know about this one, caused 12 million in China and India in 5 years. The smallpox during 20th century, 300 million people. The Spanish flu in 2 years, 50 million. AIDS since 1960, 32 million. COVID in September 2020 was only 1 million. Today we are 5 million. It's still much below to all the numbers we have here. And I will add some other events for the 20th century because that is the closest we can try to understand. And in the 20th century, we had the First World War, 20 million, but the population was only 1.8 billion. The Spanish flu was larger than 50 million, and we had a population again of 1.8 billion. And the Second World War was more than 60 million with 2.3 billion. I remember for everybody that we are close to 8 billion today, okay? Then percentage-wise, this was huge values. But then let's see how this affected the growth of the population. These curves gives you the growth of the population since 1900 here to 1900 here. That's right, till 2020 here. Now look, first you have this line and a sharp increase right here, and this sharp increase corresponds to the end of the Second World War. And you can see that it changed the slope. And this is the period in which we are looking and going through the 8 billion that we have roughly here. Then let's see what happened with all the events that I mentioned before. Now, 50 million is about the thickness of this line. And the First World War, 20 million people in 2 years, you can see that there is no change whatsoever. The next one was the Spanish flu. Again, population had continued increasing. The 50 million, very sad, but didn't change the course of history. The crisis, the 1930 crisis, what is terrible from the economic point of view, there were no deaths really due to the crisis, and we will see that later. The Second World War, 60 million people, nothing happened here. And then we are very lucky from the Second World War, we didn't have very huge events. We had SIDA and all the things, but We had the financial crisis in 2009. Again, no change. The global trade slowdown, no change. And COVID-19, you can see we are still going up and nothing has changed. What I mean by that is that this event didn't, as large as they were, didn't change the course of history. And on top of that, the 60 millions plus the 60 million of the Second World War are followed by a sharp increase in the growth of the population. Then let's read that. These deaths, as dramatic as they were, did not change significantly the inevitable growth of the world population. An economic crisis does not seem to increase mortality, on the contrary. And I found this, a publication that I reproduce here, because that's very interesting. Because the conclusion is that the crisis didn't cause the decline of the population, but on the opposite, the life expectancy was increased by several years in males, females, white and non-whites. And the only exception was the suicide mortality, which increased during the Great Depression but accounted for less than 2% of deaths. It means that if you look at this data, we can extrapolate. I said that what we need is probably to have a very large economic crisis to increase the life and have a better health. Don't work, better health. Well, the question is that we will have probably a lot of suicides, and this is a bad news. And then let's move from here. Oh, I did something wrong. Okay. Let's see now how the pandemic affected the population, not as a whole, but depending on their economic situation. This is very important. What happened with the poor people and what happened with the rich people, both at the end, one on one side, the other in the other side. Then I found a paper that was extremely interesting. Global income losses due to the COVID-19 pandemic, with a figure that is absolutely the most important, I think, I found. Let me tell you what it shows. It shows the income losses, how much income people lose from the COVID. And this is the percentile, means you have 100 points here, and you have the income of the first 1%, the income of the second 1%, etc., 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 and the income of the 100% here. Now, what you have to consider is that the poorest people are here, and the richest people are here. Then here you have the poorest people, the first percentile. The poorest people lost more than 4% of their income in the year 2020, and is expected to continue losing their income and increasing the amount in 2021. That's why the arrow is going down. There is a portion of the people that didn't change much. They lost a lot, and they will be losing a lot in 2021. And then it changed. They cross in the other direction. The rich people lost yeah, lost more than 5% in 2020, but luckily, these people are getting again, considered again in 2021. All these people are in a favorable situation. All these people are all in a very bad situation. Either they lose more or doesn't lose because there is no more to lose anyway. And again, this is I think a word that we can believe is from the World Bank. It's not because my daughter works in the World Bank that I believe the World Bank, but I think the data is very serious. This is very important. And let's go a step further. This is another paper from the same organization, and it shows very interesting things. And they write, the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic has been larger for the world poorest. That's exactly what I said before, based on the data that I showed. It is estimated that 97 million more people are living on less than $1.9 a day in 2021 because of the pandemic. That's a lot. It's 100 million people that were not poor, they were not part of the poorest, but they are now part of the poorest people. $1.9 a day. And this is an interesting figure because it shows how the poorest people was in a good process of being reduced in number and in percentage. And what happened with the COVID 2019, it increased first year of the COVID, and this is what is expected to happen for 2021. It's going to be reduced a little bit, but here there is a loss. That's without the pandemic. That's with the pandemic is going to be reduced a lot. And they write that 3 to 4 years of progress in reducing extreme poverty have been lost, but the losses have been much higher for some countries. That's true. The poorest countries suffer more than the others. Finally, global income inequality has increased, reversing recent trends of falling global inequality. Okay, that's already very sad. But we will look a little further, and then you are getting even much more sad than you are already, okay? Then I tried to look at the very rich people, and I found a paper that is called How Much Money America's Billionaires Have Made During the COVID-19 Pandemic. I am talking about billionaires. And that's the address. You can go. But what is important in this address is to see that 12 trillion richer people, that the billionaire have became richer by $12 trillion. $12 trillion is 10 to the 12. That's lots of money. Means that at the same time that the COVID was going on, well, because of the stock exchange, where these people got richer than they were. 12 trillion is an amount, incredible amount. Okay, now, the poorest got even poorer, and the richest got richer. That's the conclusion that you can get. And how? The following 10 members of the Billionaires Club have added a collective 448 billion to their fortune since January 1st, 2020. Now, the increase of wealth during COVID of the 20 richest was about $488 billion. 97 million more people live with less than $1.9 a day. And I am going to assume that even if you have only $1.9 a day to survive, you are going to live 365 days. Why I do that is because I want to make a very simple computation. This is that number, the amount of money that these 10 rich people got from the period of the COVID. That's here. This is $1.9, nothing compared with that, that they need to survive during 365 days, and they are 97 million. And then if we do this simple operation, we can conclude that we have 7.24 years. We can conclude that wealth acquired during COVID by the 10 richest billionaires could feed during more than 7 years, more than 97 million people living with less than $1 a day. And that's an important conclusion, I think. It's based on data, nothing personal on that. Now, let's see something else. This is another interesting paper. Oxfam is an international non-governmental organization. I think we can believe what they do. And during the COVID pandemic, 9 new billionaire shareholders of vaccine production pharmaceutical companies gained a combined net worth of $19 billion. $19 billion. And 8 existing billionaires who have extensive portfolios in the COVID vaccine pharma corporation have seen their combined wealth increase by $32 billion. Well, what else can I tell you? Not much. I think that everybody now is expecting to have my conclusions. And that's probably what you're looking for. Then let's see conclusions. And you'll be very mad at me because I don't have any conclusion. The objective of my presentation is to provide a do-it-yourself kit and let every one of you get your personal conclusion. However, since probably at the end of the presentation will be question, I am sure somebody is going to ask me, well, okay, but what is your own personal conclusion? And in that case, I am going to tell you my own. Well, the most important, I think, is that Homo sapiens sapiens is not an endangered species in spite of COVID-19, and that it is far from extinction. That's the most important. We are still here for a certain time. We are going still to increase the population with all the consequences that we know. And COVID is going to be a small bump on the road. That's all. Then this is, as I say, the bump on the road. The big problem, and I don't have an answer, is that we don't know where the road leads us. That's the big problem. And that in the short and the middle term future will be, like we used to say, business as usual, or worst. And this is the end. Thank you very much to everybody, and thank you for your patience.
Very, very interesting.
Thank you, Professor Fruman. Thank you very much for your excellent lecture.
It's a pleasure. Okay, I wait for the questions.
Okay. We don't have any questions in the chat, but I can do a question. Opa, acho que ele saiu.
Será?
Ele caiu. Acho que a conexão caiu.
It's a shame.
Vou mandar uma mensagem.
Temos bastante gente aí?
Não. Temos 6 pessoas agora.
Muito interessante essa análise dele baseada em dados, hein? Mostrando
Sim.
algo que é visível. Houve, na verdade, uma grande concentração de renda e um número acentuado de pobreza, né? De pobres. Essa que é a... E não podemos esquecer que, de fato, muitos desses grandes ricos estão ligados às grandes companhias farmacêuticas, né?
É.
Como sair dessa? Como sair dessa, né?
Vamos ver se ele... Pronto.
Now?
Yes.
Good. Okay.
Good, Professor.
Then, do you have any question?
Yes, I have a question. Scientists believe that new pandemics are already on the way. In your opinion, what is the main factor or the most worrying one that we should be act or combat?
Can you wait for 1 minute? Because I have it. Okay. Can you start again the question, please, Tatiana?
Yes. Scientists believe that new pandemics are already on the way. In your opinion, what is the main factor or the most worrying one that we should act or combat now to prevent the emergence of new pandemics?
Oh, that's... I am not an epidemiologist myself. I cannot answer the question. I don't know. I can answer the question about what can be the consequences, but not about how to prevent that.
It seems that this is impossible to prevent.
Yeah.
No,
It's caused mainly by the increase of the world population. That is the...
No, I don't know. I really don't know. No answer.
Because with the increase of the population, we are destroying forests and affecting a lot our environmental.
Yeah, but we don't have any proof from where COVID-19 is really coming. No one single proof.
Yes, I found it very interesting the numbers you presented. Okay, it's true that when we look the evolution of the GWP, and also the population, I agree that we need to agree that the COVID-19 pandemic was not very significant to influence these numbers. And the most important also is the number of poor peoples increased a lot, increased significantly, and at the same time we had a very important concentration of richness.
Yes.
This is a main point that we can see also here in our country, looking the street, especially in the big cities.
Hmm. Yeah.
A lot of number of shops closed, a lot of restaurants closed. The life for poor people was significantly more difficult now.
Affected. Yes, absolutely. Yes, sure. I don't know in Brazil because I didn't go to, and I don't know the data. The data I show is serious, means that I am sure of that. I cannot make any kind of statement about what happened in Brazil because I only look at global data, that's all.
We can at least 20 million of families, 20 million of families were affected by this pandemic here in Brazil. And
Yeah.
it is meaning that we have more or less 90 million of people. 90, if you can, we can put at least 4 people per family, and we have 90 million of peoples
Okay.
having
That's
problems
about
to live.
that's about 1/3 of the Brazilian population.
The Brazilian population
Is
is
about 1/3.
no is
No.
almost a half.
Uh,
Is
yeah,
almost a half
yeah,
of the
yeah.
people.
Well, or yeah, yeah. Later. Yeah.
This is terrible, and
Brazilian
this is true.
population.
Huh? This is true. This is not the
Well,
numbers show this.
then I think that the consequences of COVID um, are going to be very serious on a portion of the population. Yes, absolutely. You're right. That's what I try to show.
Yes. The other interesting point is also that a certain number of very rich people
Yeah.
are involved with the pharmaceutical laboratories, and
Yeah, it's
this
a
is
big
also true.
business. It's a big business.
Yes, a big business. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. But you have to think two things are important: is the labs that sell the vaccines or the products associated,
Yeah.
and the stocks that go up and down, and that make the richness of these people. You see, uh, the two things together make that you have more rich people that become richer and poor people that become poorer. That's all.
Yes. I think you showed that we at least 7 year come back in the
CO2?
not only in the CO2 but in the reduction of the forest.
No, 3 to 4 years.
Yes,
Three,
three to 4 years.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, 3 to
Yes,
4.
it's true that we reduced a lot
Yeah,
this
but that's already
way.
that's already practically 100 million people,
Yeah.
because we are 8 billion. Small percentages make a lot, a
Yeah.
number. Okay, people don't realize that when you talk in percentage. Say, well, let's see, poor people are only 7.5% or 8%. If you go from 8 to 9%, doesn't make it large change. It's wrong. It's a lot of change.
Yes. Tatiana, do you have
Other questions?
In the chat, we don't have questions, but I think that the most important to combat or fighting about new pandemics is help or diminuir
decrease?
decrease the difference between rich and poor in the world, combat the poverty in the world. I think this is the most important. Yeah.
Well, I would say we have to be very modest. I don't think that we can change the course of history, and that a pandemic can occur at any time. What we can change is the consequences of the pandemic. But the pandemic itself, we cannot change. The variant, the Omicron or the Delta or the whatever, we are going to have another one that is going to be the beta, the whatever. We will change a lot. Then the pandemic is to the medical personnel, the politicians to manage, but the change on the society, that's another thing. The curve that I show, where you see the population by percentile, show that you have a fraction that are on the other side, lower side, the poorest side, and then you have this fraction that are on the richer side. The difference are extremely important. When you think that 99% of the population or the richness of the 1% rich people is practically what have about 90% of the population, then you see that there is a difference, incredible difference between the ones that are in the lower side and the others that are in the higher side.
Yeah. Thank you, Professor.
And there is a big paradox in all of this, because every day a lot of hungry people need to search their food. And in Brazil, more than 20% of the food is lost.
Oh, yes, I know that, but
In
that's
the
a
world,
problem.
also.
Yeah, but this is a problem of logistic.
Yes.
That's
In part is true. Is logistic. Yes.
logistic. Okay.
Yes. conservation and the
Well,
food.
I am not trying to solve all the problems with humanity. I am only doing what I did. This presentation is to give elements for everybody interested in the question to try to go through data and decide what he thinks is right for
Yeah.
him and for others.
Ok. Ok, Tatiana, vamos então.
Ok.
Eu queria falar algumas coisas aqui, então, finalizar.
O senhor quer falar?
Acho que I think we can close,
Sure.
and I would like to thanks a lot Daniel Fruman for the honor, and particular for me, it was an honor to have him today talking about this very important subject, and with very well prepared presentation, very interesting with numbers and with important points to our reflection. Falando em português, eu quero agradecer a todos aqui presentes para essa nossa apresentação, mais uma palestra dentro do ciclo de palestras do PRH 45, da ANP, National Agency of Oil. E com isso nós estamos fechando o nosso ciclo deste ano, né? Com a palestra do professor Fruman. O professor Fruman, que tem uma carreira científica brilhante e que nos últimos anos tem se dedicado a ele fala hobbies, né? A essa questão do crescimento populacional, das questões econômicas e também ambientais associadas. E também aquele outro hobby dele que ele não deixa, né, que é um grande especialista na área de la broderie liturgique, os bordados litúrgicos de séculos passados, século XV, XVI, XIX. Daniel, au grand plaisir de te voir. Thank you very much.
Merci à vous deux, merci à ton invitation, et puis j'attends que les gens réfléchissent et qu'ils peuvent se mettre en rapport avec moi s'ils le souhaitent.
Ok. Ciao.
Ok.
Gracias por tu charla, ¿no? En inglés, en Spanish. Una charla.
Es una charla. It's a talk.
Yeah, a talk.
In
Very
Spanish,
interesting.
in Spanish, we use like in English, talk.
Talk.
Ciao. Okay.
Ciao, Daniel.
Bye-bye. Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Tatiana.
Bye,
Thank you
Professor.
very much.
Merry Christmas
Bye.
and a Happy New Year.
Yes.
Thank you.
Merry Christmas.
Also for
and
you.
Very
Bye-bye.
Happy New Year for
Bye.
all of us.
Bye.
Obrigada a todos que estão nos assistindo e até o ano que vem no YouTube.
Muito
Bye.
obrigado, Tatiana. Tudo de bom? A gente se
Obrigada
fala.
também.
Bye.
Bye.
Ok, comment c'était?